This morning, I wanted to continue preaching. We looked at the story of Jairus during Father's Day, and I don't know if you remember that. But Jairus was in a very desperate situation. Jairus had a daughter that was very ill. And the only way that he thought that his daughter would get well, it was by asking Jesus to come and heal his daughter. And today we're going to look at the other side of the story about a woman that was also in a very desperate situation. And the only hope that she had was Jesus. But before I continue with the story of this woman in the Bible, I have a little story to share with you. A few weeks ago, I was in the office, and Betty Whitfield was there as well. And we had a visit from this gentleman. And this gentleman came to our church because his dog was very ill. And the cops came and took the dog away from him and took him to the vet because of the illness of the dog. So he came to the church asking if he could use the phones so he could call the vet and find out how his dog was doing. But this man was a homeless man. Have you ever seen a dirty person before? Well, this man was beyond dirty. I mean, he was so dirty that he had layers of mud, like dirt, on his skin. Not only on his arms, but on his legs. He was wearing shorts and a tank top. And very, very, dirty guy. But the funny thing was he didn't smell dirty. I don't know how that worked out, but he just looked dirty, but he didn't smell dirty. But he was very desperate. You should have seen his face. He just wanted to find out how his dog was doing. That's all. He didn't ask for anything. And I was so heartbroken for him because I knew that was the only thing that this man had. Maybe the only family, the only thing that he could care for was this dog. And he had named the dog Little Bull. And he kept calling, what is the dog's name? He goes, Little Bull, Little Bull. But at the end, the dog, wasn't ready. The dog wasn't ready to get picked up, so he left the church. But he was so dirty that after he left, I had to grab some Lysol and start spraying, the chair where he sat, the phone that he talked. And also I went and washed my hands very well. And then Betty Whitfield goes, what was that? And I said, Betty, he was calling to see if his dog was okay. Do you remember that, Betty? Do you remember that, Betty? Yes? So this morning, I wanted to talk to you about this story about this woman. The Bible says that this woman had been ill for 12 years. And the Bible says that she had spent all that she had in doctors and in different ways so that she could be made well again. And nothing was working for her. Everything that she tried had failed. But see, this woman, the story of this woman goes beyond an illness. The issue of blood that she had, according to the Leviticus law, she was an unclean woman. Every time a woman, when her monthly period will come in, men or anyone were not allowed to touch women. Because the moment that they would touch them, they would become impure, unclean. And they would have to go through this cleansing so that they could become pure again. So you figure what stage this woman was in. She had been like this for 12 years. Everybody knew in the town that this was an unclean woman. Everybody knew her circumstance. And there was nothing else that she could do. Imagine, when was the last time somebody even shook her hand? When was the last time that she got a hug from anyone? It must have been 12 years ago. And she was in a desperate situation. But this is not, believe it or not, is not a story of healing. This is a much more complex story. This is about a woman that needed to become unclean again. This is about a woman that needed purification. And there is nowhere else that she's able to find this cleansingness, this pureness again, but by finding Jesus. And the Bible says that Jesus arrived in this town. And the first thing that came to Jesus was this man, Jairus. Very desperate. Come to my house. My daughter is dying. Can you come? And Jesus is trying to go through this crowd of people as he is going towards the house of Jairus. And all of a sudden, the Bible says he felt like somebody touched him. And Jesus is moving through the crowds. Imagine in your mind how many people this woman touched that day that should have been cleansed, because she's going through this crowded place trying to reach and touch Jesus. And then the Bible says that all of a sudden Jesus stopped. And Jesus says, somebody touched me. Who touched me? And the disciples, in a very sarcastic way, he says, Jesus, what do you mean who touched you? Look at all who's around you. Are you kidding me? Why are you asking who has touched you? And Jesus says, somebody touched me. And in that moment, imagine what this woman must have felt. Literally, Jesus is going to put this woman on the spot. And she comes out in a very brave sort of manner and says, the woman says, I touched you, Jesus. And now the whole crowd, all the eyes are on Jesus and on this unclean woman. That everybody knew that she was unclean, by the way. And Jesus tells her, your faith has made you well. He did this publicly because everybody knew that this woman was unclean. Now Jesus wanted it to make sure that everyone knew that this woman was a clean woman now. Jesus wanted the public to know that it was okay to touch her again. That it was okay for you to go reach out and grab her hand. That it was okay for you to go and give her a hug. You see, this is about a woman that needed cleansing. This is a story about a woman that the only thing that could cleanse her was the Messiah, Jesus. And she had so much faith in her that she said, if I can only touch a piece of his garment, I could be made well again. We know what dirty looks like. We know what unclean looks like. We can spot a person and say, that person hadn't had a shower in a long time, right? And then we look at ourselves and we can say, wow, look how clean I am. Ooh, I even smell good. Right? But this story is about Jesus. inviting the unclean. This story is about Jesus making the unclean clean again. Jesus is the only one that is able to cleanse us. Jesus is the only one that is able to purify us again. And all we have to do is reach out like this woman did in the story of the Bible. The Bible says in a few verses, it says, knock and the door shall be open. Seek and you shall find. And this woman is teaching us to say, reach out and Jesus will be right there for you. You see, we have all been made unclean by the sin that we have committed. And one day you reached out to Jesus and you asked Jesus, will you forgive me for the sins that I have committed? And Jesus made you whole and clean again. We are at this corner. We are a church. And people will come and will go to churches sometimes in desperate moments. Like this man that came in very dirty, but he was desperate. He wanted it to know how his dog was doing. And God sometimes is going to send people our way that are not going to smell the best, that are not going to look the best, but they're reaching out. They need help. And what is going to be our reaction? Are we going to say, no? You didn't take a shower today? Go clean yourself, then come back? Or are we going to be an inviting church like Jesus? Allowing others to reach out when they are in time of need. And say yes to those that might look different than us. You see, Jesus was a rabbi. Jesus should have never allowed an unclean woman to come and touch him, because that would have made him an unclean. But God, Jesus, has the power to purify anything that has become impure. God, Jesus, has the power to cleanse anything that has become dirty. And there is anything, any sin that we have committed that we can say, God will not accept, God will not cleanse me. God will not purify me. You see, we all have in our minds to say, that is a filthy sin. And I don't know what a filthy sin is to you. I don't know what sin you think that you could commit that God is not able to forgive you and cleanse you from. But this story is about that. Is that there's any sin that we have in our lives, God says, reach out to me and I will cleanse you. Reach out to me and I will purify you. Reach out to me and I will make you well again.